You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact. If you're listening, please send help. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we are watching New Ground. It first aired 6th of January 1992. We've arrived in 1992, everyone. I feel we might be a little bit late. This episode had a story by Sarah Charno and Stuart Charno and a teleplay by Grant Rosenberg. It was directed by Robert Shearer. James, what happens in this one?
The Enterprise is helping a scientist with a new form of propulsion, a soliton wave, which offers warp travel without a drive. For the first dangerous test of this experimental technology, they decide to fire it straight at another populated planet. Meanwhile, Worf's mother turns up with Alexander and buggers off as swiftly as she can, leaving the Klingon working out what it means to be a father. Turns out, Alexander is difficult, disruptive, and a liar, which is odd considering his mother was murdered and his father sent him away instantly. Worf decides to send him away to a Klingon school, but can they resolve their differences and somehow tie into the science plot before the episode is done?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? Alex, you had not seen this episode before. Did you like it?
Well, before even getting to that, I think it's just worth taking a moment to commemorate the ending of another disc in the Star Trek Blu-ray set.
It's been in that player for months and months.
I mean, we've been doing this podcast 10 years now, and some people, mark milestones in their lives by, I don't know, finishing school, going to university, moving house, having a child. But I have come to mark moments of these last 10 years by when I can file away a Blu-ray disc and probably not return to it. So it has been a momentous occasion. There was a brief pause when I put that disc away and went, just one more disc down and another step closer to death.
I should make it clear that Alex's mortality is not connected to the Blu-rays. We're not just keeping him alive for the purposes of this podcast.
It depends how long this takes. But I think the other reason that I had that brief moment of pause was that you're talking about an episode with a father dealing with a child that is telling lies, and having spent the last week dealing with my son insisting that he doesn't need the toilet before promptly shitting his pants and then saying it's too late. This sort of resonated a little bit.
28 years old he is.
Yeah. So weirdly, I feel like I can't give you a thoroughly objective opinion. In some respects, you would expect me to say that, this hit home, and therefore I connected with it. Whereas in actual fact, I hated the little bastard.
I had forgotten how much this was Star Trek in soap opera mode. It's very much father-son relationship. I've got to deal with the school, I've got to talk to the teacher, I've got to deal with the counsellor, I've got to deal with medical admin. I had forgotten how much of it was that, and so little of it is actually science fiction. I mean, the science fiction is there to a degree, but it's very much, how does Worf deal with his mother saying, we cannot look after your unruly child anymore, you have to step up to the plate, and there's there's some intrigue there. Obviously, they've set up all this stuff. Alexander has been conceived and born during the run of the show, and I'm pretty sure should be about 3 years old at this point in time, maybe. But Klingon time, whatever.
Klingons age very differently because he's a full-grown adult at the end of Deep Space Nine, which is 7.5 years away from now, I think. 8 years away.
By the middle of Deep Space Nine, he's, I don't know, I think about 17 when he should be about 8. So let's not worry too much about that.
If you're going to do a soap opera story, you're going to do it with either Data or Worf, aren't you?
I think so. And Worf obviously has the depth in that you can hang a story on him, and I know Gene Roddenberry was against that at the time, but obviously
he's dead now.
Yeah, exactly, so they can do what they want. But this isn't the typical Worf story that you might expect. This isn't the Klingon rituals. This is sort of, these are the consequences of your action. You fathered a child. Now deal with it and have conversations with him and don't just ignore him. And I think there's some interesting stuff here, because I think in Family, when we first met the Rodchenkos, you thought Worf's pretty awful to his parents. He doesn't show affection, and obviously he is Klingon, but he seemed pretty standoffish with his family. Again, well, he's not that nice to his mother, and he's absolutely horrendous to his son. It's the Star Trek Picard problem, in that we only like these characters in a very particular context, which is being the crew of a starship. If you show their personal lives, then you just realise that they're totally awful people.
Although this episode provides a completely different perspective on that, because weirdly, Worf is actually looking forward to his mother and son coming, and then he's really happy when they've arrived. And it's completely contrary to how you imagine any other character would be in that situation. But it's not only quite sweet, but it does feel right for Worf. Somebody who has honour in his family, that he would look forward to seeing them. He doesn't get embarrassed by his mother and son being there.
Well, until the point that he is. Until he has to look after Alexander, and then he goes into a meeting with Picard, and he's tapping his desk impatiently, and then, Mr. Worf, I thought we said 11 o'clock. It's 11:02 now.
Even Picard cannot be arsed with this episode.
I thought it was quite funny, his communicator keep going off. Like, you can't put your communicator on silent, so you might be in a meeting or perhaps an intimate moment and your communicator keeps going off. Like that was decent comedy, but also, I guess as a parent, that might be identifiable as there's always something else to do.
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of escapism for me in this edition. As someone who literally in 2 weeks' time has his son's school interview. Yeah.
Well, good luck with that.
Thanks.
If they have any models of lizards, just keep your son away from them. It's for the best.
I guess I'm not watching Star Trek because I want to see parent-teacher meetings about disruptive children, or I want to watch them going on a field trip to the zoo, because there's so little extra element to this particular storyline. It is played exactly as it is. Here is a father taking his son to meet the teacher. The son is lying. We have to deal with that. Let's go and talk to the counsellor. It's not done with the son has actually been possessed by an alien or something like that, or space ghosts or something like that, or he's not stealing and things are just disappearing. It is actually literally played beat for beat, like it could be on any kind of soap opera or any kind of Waterloo Road type drama or something like that. It's just...
Yeah, you've got to say that it would liven up something like Downton Abbey, where they're debating sending a child to boarding school, if it then, was revealed that the child was possessed by Satan. Yeah, maybe. I'm just saying, maybe, Julian Fellows, that's why your new Downton film flopped.
It is difficult with a kind of introducing a child character, because you can either have them as precocious and a genius, and that doesn't really work because they're annoying, or you can have them slightly unruly. And I think Alexander, you can very much, based on his background, understand how he is, but in this episode in particular, there's very little way in. A little kid dressed up as a Klingon is quite cute, but the behaviour is, yeah. Do you know what? I think I liked him more than you did, because I think Worf is absolutely terrible, and the kids just need some attention.
I mean that's true. I just don't feel that Alexander has a huge character.
No.
A lot of the time it is just sort of silence and then one-word responses, which I get is what they're going for, but it makes it difficult for me, personally, to feel emotionally involved in that character without having to be emotionally involved, as you say, vicariously because of the fact that Worf is being a prick.
But, I mean, Worf isn't intentionally being a prick. He's trying to be a good father the only way he knows. And that, I think, is what makes it interesting. It's analysing how our characters react in a certain situation, and this is how Worf would react. It does feel right for him.
That all he wants to do is send his child away.
True. I guess then the fundamental issue it comes back to is what we were saying before, is how interesting a story is this for TNG?
There's more to this than a soap opera or, generic kind of family drama. I think it is saying something about Worf's character. How much of him wanting Alexander to go to Klingon school is him wishing that he went to Klingon school.
And I guess there's kind of guilt as well, the memory of Kalar. And obviously, when we met Alexander, that was the first time Worf knew that he had a son. And I suppose he doesn't really know how to process that. And there's quite a lot of Troy scenes in this episode. They're setting up this kind of familial relationship that Alexander will have with the Troy family. I think there are seeds of that. Did you think this was a good use of the Troy character?
I struggle to remember what she did.
She had a counselling session.
I watched it yesterday.
She did her job. She had Worf reflect on how good of a father is he being. I think she was well utilised here.
And if it wasn't for her, they would not have gone on the field trip to see the very, very bad puppets.
And the worst thing about the puppets is when Riker rescues them at the end, you can see where the hands go in.
It's so bad. Yeah, I mean they could have definitely had fun with that, but it's just like here's some rubber sticks that move slightly, and also like Alexander gets told off for stealing one of the toys. Would they not have better toys in the 24th century? Those look pretty poor plastic dinosaurs.
Rick Berman, on his way to set, suddenly realised, crap, we haven't got a prop. Just sees his kid there, snatches the toy out of its hands.
And then he thinks, now I'll have to get the prop.
So, I mean, other than that, we've not talked about this experimental warp technology, the big science plot.
Because it's irrelevant.
I think exactly like in A Matter of Time, which was we've got to do the thing on the planet. Here we had the exact same thing of like a scientist man on a screen saying some things and Geordi helping, and just I quite like the stuff with Geordi at the start, him being excited about, this is like going to be breaking the sound barrier. It's a warp wave. And they're like, oh, this is going to just revolutionize. This is going to be so much better than a warp drive. And you see it, and you see how it's executed, and you think, is it? So you can't stop yourself. You can't control your speed. I don't really see the practical application of it, other than as a very long range weapon.
Well, what if it turns out that warp drive is destroying the universe through universe climate change, and they need to find an alternative methods of travelling?
I think they would address that in one episode and then decide that was a bit on the nose and actually not a very good idea. I quite like the idea of different forms of propulsion. I think, Discovery, that was its big thing when it started.
They tortured animals in order to travel really far.
because that's Star Trek.
It is Star Trek. It's the Star Trek episode Equinox, where they're killing loads of aliens in order to travel far distances, and they're the bad guys.
Everything's Star Trek, and if you say anything negative about it, you're a gatekeeper and not a real fan. Or something.
It's lovely to not be invested.
Anyway, so this wave goes and they fire it at a planet because the planet will send out another wave to break it. I mean, this sounded like a bad plan to me. But from the start, I was like, are you sure?
I've been watching this film, Star Wars. It involved firing some energy at a planet. Now, my tape ran out before I saw how it went, but I'm sure it all went swimmingly.
A ship rides a wave. The wave is more powerful than they think it's going to. The ship explodes, and then the Enterprise has to get in front of it. Again, there's two options here. There's two options to the solution. One is you match the frequency and you dissipate it, or another one is let's just fire some torpedoes at it and see what happens.
I mean, it's bollocks, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, it's very much killing time in the episode.
My ultimate and most damning verdict on that element is really one of who cares.
Yeah, and there's some episodes which you think, okay, there's an A plot and a B plot, and they're not directly connected, but at least thematically there is something going on that matches, that is about something. That whole plot is about nothing. Even in A Matter of Time, the last episode, you could say, oh, it's got something to say about climate change. But this one is just like, we can do, I'll be generous and say a cool effect. There's no other level to it, and I guess there's no other level to the Worf and Alexander stuff either. It is here is a sort of sci-fi idea, which is kind of cool, which somebody maybe read something about. You can travel on waves, and then here is a parent dealing with an unruly child, and okay, we get some character revelations in that, but yeah, I think the whole crisis is very manufactured. Other than obviously, oh, Alexander's trapped with the space puppets, and we have to have an action sequence to get him out, and Riker has to save the puppets. Yeah.
Well, imagine if at the end, when Worf is holding Alexander, Riker just says, "Hey, look at this," and he just has his hands right up the alien.
That would have been better if they'd been attacking him in a sort of Rod Hull and Emu type way. Riker running down the corridor with this thing snapping at him.
With Data just stood there confused, going, But Commander, this is not an emu. This is part of you. I don't understand this. I think also what you're saying about it's a kind of irrelevant B-plot. I think there is also a problem of sequencing here. Because really, you shouldn't have this episode following the preceding one. Because it's too similar in the B-plot not being particularly related. You need something in between to separate that out. Otherwise, it just... Especially when we're watching it like this, I realise that's not how it was originally aired, but even watching it 1 week to the next, it feels like treading water a little bit in that sense.
They do feel very much like format Star Trek episodes, almost like spec scripts. It's like, well, this is what you can do. You have this 5-act structure. You have a scientific plot. Read a science magazine, see what ideas are out there, maybe extrapolate from that, do a bit of research into it, and then you can have a character plot. And that's exactly what this is. And it's just, yeah, it's no more than that. And it's not badly written. It's just, I just don't think it's strong enough an idea on either side to kind of feel meaningful. It's certainly, it's not bad, but I wouldn't recommend it to a friend, nor would I watch it again, probably.
If I'm being honest, I would say that the B plot in this kind of doesn't need to exist, and the A plot needs to be the B plot to another episode.
I kind of appreciate that, just this once, they're kind of doing normal B plot material as the A plot. They're allowing there to be more character material at the centre. Because it is just, it's one episode out of 26.
Yeah, and also, I guess you can say that it sets up more possibilities for Worf. And maybe on the starship with children, it makes sense for one of your series regulars to have a child on the ship who isn't Wesley Crusher.
Or a star child called Ian.
Exactly. They should have kept Ian around. Would you be happy to see more of Alexander?
Oh God, no. And I feel I'm going to be crushingly disappointed in that regard.
What about Alexander and Luxana Troy?
Well, at least I feel that would liven things up a bit.
Alexander in a cowboy hat.
Fine. How does that work with ridges? Fine, I guess.
What about Worf, Troy, and Alexander in cowboy hats?
How long have I got to mentally brace myself for this?
Troy does an accent.
I think it's season 6.
Oh, I've got years. It's fine.
That episode, by the way, is called, just to brace yourself for it, that episode is called A Fistful of Daters.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's a lot like Gunmen of the Apocalypse.
I think it aired roughly around the same time, in fairness.
Yes, roughly.
And that's why I immediately picked up the phone to my lawyer.
I mean, of all the episodes to pick up your phone to the lawyer, I think that's probably the one. Did you enjoy Worf's display of super Klingon strength, lifting a polystyrene block off Alexander's hurt leg?
Well, that's kind of a typical television trope, isn't it? The father getting superhuman strength to save their child.
Yeah, a nice metaphor. It's, oh, I am strong enough to do this. And then they have the little speech, which I thought was quite nice at the end, which is, we will face these challenges together.
It'll be very challenging for you to go to a Klingon school, but even more challenging is for me to put up with your shit every day. Yeah, I mean, that final speech is probably the best bit from the episode, to be honest. Mainly because it encompasses the entire themes in a very short amount of time.
So, Alex, have you learned anything about being a better father from this episode?
Yes, send the bastard away.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was thinking. If your child's ever naughty, you should say to him, if you continue to be naughty, we'll send you to Klingon school.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that this tells you is that if you do have an unruly child, one that lies repeatedly, the best way to gain their compliance is to engineer a situation where they nearly die.
I think maybe just get a fun hand puppet will probably be better than that.
Why have they not merchandised those puppets? If it was Star Wars, we all would have had one of those.
I'm surprised Eagle Moss haven't done that lizard as one of their models, because it's kind of Eagle Moss shape.
Right, with that rambling meanderings, let's wander off and see if we've got anything further to say on Quickfire.
Quickfire.
So, Andrew, how do you pronounce that legendary figure in Klingon history?
I believe it's Kales.
Kal? You sound very callous with that pronunciation there.
Kales is how I would say it.
You see, they've mentioned him before, haven't they? This isn't like first appearance weirdness.
Wasn't there a recreation in the original series?
There was, yeah. Because I just assumed that Alexander said it wrong, so Michael Dorn just said, "Oh, I guess I have to say it wrong as well."
And so now everyone's saying it wrong. Like, it's almost like they've not even watched the original Star Trek. And, I don't think they've even read Memory Alpha for the pronunciation.
They were so lazy in 1991. They couldn't even go into the whatever Phil Farron's book existed back then, and I'm sure it would have told them. You see, that's why Doctor Who was really smart to have Ian Levine as a continuity advisor in the 1980s.
Well, I know what you... Oh, sorry. Continuity. Yes, okay.
LaForge states that watching The Wave will be like being there to see Chuck Yeager break the sound barrier or Zefram Cochrane engage the first warp drive. And he was in fact there to see Zefram Cochrane engage the first warp drive because he was a pilot, but nobody noticed that at the time. And also they're mentioning Zefram Cochrane, which they're clearly setting up first contact here, aren't they?
It's strange how they always mention Cochrane as the inventor of warp drive when warp drive already existed.
It's like when people say Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas, when he didn't, and it had been sailed by many people on many trade routes from many different races. But, history is written by Gene Roddenberry.
Oh my Jesus Christ, join the Nitpickers Guild today.
How do you join the Nitpickers Guild?
Attention, all nitpicking trackers. Just send in a mistake that you found in Star Trek The Next Generation, one that isn't included in this book. No shit, Sherlock. Open brackets, you can also send in stuff on Deep Space Nine and even the original series, close brackets. The entry will make you an official member of the Nitpickers Guild. Send it to Phil Farrand, Chief Nitpicker at the Nitpickers Guild, P.O. Box 6248. Note, all submissions become the property of Phil Farrand and will not be returned. Submissions may or may not be acknowledged. Every effort will be made to credit you. However, Phil Farrand makes no personal guarantee that such credit will be given.
We represent the Nitpickers Guild. The Nitpickers Guild.
So this episode introduced the Corvin Gilvo, the puppets which were designed by Michael Westmore. It later appeared in Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode, The Nagus. So we're going to have to watch that just to look out for them. But it's like, could we bring back those aliens? Or what have we got lying around that we can dress a set with?
They put it in there as a fun continuity reference.
Remember Star Trek?
We should be excited to see Worf's Skeletor aliens that he likes to fight on the holodeck again. This is the last time they appear in Star Trek The Next Generation. Although there's a similar program on Deep Space Nine, but it's not Worf's. So, remember the Skeletor holograms?
I did not, but then when you described them as the Skeletor holograms, it reminded me that this had been a thing before.
That's the character that's going to come back in Season 3 of Star Trek Picard.
According to Brandon Braga, the production staff received a lot of negative feedback on this episode. I think it's an episode where you could complain it's getting to be like a soap opera on the ship, perhaps because the B story was just that, a B story with the soliton wave. Oh man, we could have just not done the podcast and said that instead.
It's strange how they took negative criticism like that on the chin. Whereas, I don't think you would see that now, would you?
No, because they all come out and say, this is the best season ever, this is the best thing we've done. And then, for the publicity round of the next show, 6 months later, they go, we've fixed a lot of the problems from the first season, without really acknowledging what they were.
And then they're not fixed.
Yeah. Well, they appeared to be fixed for approximately 45 minutes, and then... No.
Don't worry, everyone's coming back next year.
Yeah,
Right.
I didn't even mean that as like an attack on, the people who currently run Star Trek. It just seems like in the past they were more open to listening to fans' criticisms. They acknowledged when fans didn't like a certain episode, and they kind of did learn from it.
I guess the big difference is that to get that opinion, someone would either have to go to the effort of writing a letter and sending it in, or the people making the show would have to meet these people at a convention. Largely.
The thing about Star Trek is it's so heavily analysed after the fact that other TV shows people might not be talking about in the same way or to the same level, the same fandom. And so the writers are forced to reflect on something which was a job, and they got it out the door and they got it done because they were under a lot of pressure to get 26 episodes done a year, and it was always a battle. And it's incredible that essentially a writing team of 5 or 6 people with freelancers coming in every so often managed to produce 26 pretty decent hours of television. But yeah, it does, obviously, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and it's very nice that they've taken the time to talk about it over the years, probably more than they would like to do.
I think that's why, we're kind of critical that this is one of those episodes that sticks strictly to that kind of Michael Piller structure that he imposed on certainly Next Generation and early Deep Space Nine. But it was necessary to get 26 episodes out the door, particularly when the writing staff were so young and relying on freelancers. The only reason that Deep Space Nine kind of became the show it did was because they had all these years to effectively train the staff up.
Hey, that's the end of another episode. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, or hopefully more. We will be back again soon, and we'll be talking about hero worship. Do join us then. But for now, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. What features in an episode written by the ghost of Gene Roddenberry? Boobs.